Welcome to the 100th episode of Trends with Benefits, an award-winning podcast by Van Eck with a forward-looking perspective. To celebrate this special occasion, we flipped the script to learn a bit more about our host, Ed Lopez.
Hello and welcome to a very special episode of Trends with Benefits. My name is JP Lee and I work at Van Eck. I've been a product manager here for about 6 years and I've worked with Ed the whole time. I feel very lucky and grateful for the opportunity to work closely with Ed on a number of different things, and I'm very excited to turn the podcast microphone back to Ed for the spotlight. Ed, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, JP. Thanks very much. You said some nice things. Do you mean them?
Oh, boy. So, Ed, what's your job at Van Eck? What do you actually do all day?
Kicking your butt. Where's my ETF? What do I do all day? Yeah, no, I at this current stage, I feel like I'm more of a coach and a guide to an excellent team of product managers, and evaluating the marketplace for not only ETFs but now mutual funds as well, but everything that Van Eck might offer in terms of an investment fund or offering, and working with you guys to assess different ideas that we might want to bring to market, what the market is looking for, what advisors are looking for, what's of interest to us, and trying to do stuff that is value add for an investor's portfolio, but also fun and innovative.
So I remember a couple of years ago, you did like a lunch and learn or something, and you were talking about back when you were at RiotX, or you had this crazy long yarn about how back when you were on the mutual fund side and indexes were just this concept, and then we've gone from indexes being a concept that you benchmark an active managed portfolio against to now there's ETFs and strategies built around these passive index. So, I think it would be interesting to hear kind of maybe where you've been and what you've done and what your career trajectory is, because that story always really caught my attention.
Oh, that long yarn. Okay. Yeah. Well, I started, I'm going to skip over a few years, but after college, I tried my hand at being a financial advisor. Wasn't right for me at the time. And I found my way to Chicago, and I worked for a company called Ibbotson Associates in Chicago. And that's where I really cut my teeth on the investment markets, capital markets, understanding the history of markets really, and getting exposure to different types of investors, asset allocation as a concept, data. I remember one of my good friends sitting down and basically teaching me stats. So the basic, mean variance optimization stats of standard deviation and return and geometric return, all that stuff. And from that basis, it kind of really took off from there. When I was at Ibbotson, learning some of the asset allocation software, got asked to help lead this fledgling little presentation business. For those that are old enough might remember these charts of the market that go back to 1926, these Ibbotson stocks, bonds, bills, and inflation charts that had all these different events throughout time. Basically, the point being, all these crazy things happen, but the market still keeps kind of churning higher and higher. So don't worry about it, stay invested. That was a product line, and Ibbotson had a bunch of those charts as like PowerPoint charts, physical charts. I got tapped to take over that business line, enhance it, if you will. And I think one of the things that I've learned up to that point about myself is that I was pretty good at writing, pretty good at data actually too, and found that through data, there are some great stories to tell. A lot of people think about left brain, right brain. I've always kind of thought of myself as kind of center and leveraging both sides of it. And the creative side, for me, particularly in what we do in terms of communicating financial concepts, was really driven by the analytical side. So I could be way more creative if I had the data in front of me and could manipulate it and look at it and try to generate a story around it. That skill set led me to launch a product called Sales Ideas that we sold subscriptions to firms like RiotX, where I eventually went, and to other firms that would rebrand it, give it to financial advisors to give to clients. Simple, one page, 3 points. You might recognize some of these main concepts, as we talk about content on the team. I don't know. I think that's where I really kind of honed that idea of finding the story in the data, trying to find nuggets of information that maybe a lot of people overlook or whatever it is. But in any case, I think that skill set helped me get a job at RiotX product strategist or something like that. I would work with sales and the portfolio managers. I would help the head of the business unit as well, and by being the expert on the individual ETFs. And that was fun. That was great. Ridex was doing really innovative stuff as well, kind of cutting edge. They did a lot of the geared mutual funds. And then, of course, 2009 happens, and a lot of people get laid off, not just people at Ridex, but all across the country. And then, lucky enough, my boss or one of my bosses there, it was network. He was a great networker, Tim Meyer. He's awesome. I should give him props. He was talking with somebody at Van Eck and said, "Hey, there's this role here, and you might check it out." And that's kind of how I ended up at Van Eck. I got connected through friends. So networks are important, and yeah. So I don't know what else I can say. Sorry, that was a bit of a ramble. That's probably the most I've spoke. That's probably the most I've talked or said. Sorry, that's probably the most I've said on my own podcast through all 100 episodes at any one time.
Testament to your character to let other people shine. That's all I'll say. What were you first hired for, Van Eck? What was your first job?
It was a product manager, and my first assignment really was to help get HAP off the ground, or it was off the ground. It was running, but really get some attention to that.
How many ETFs did we have then?
Oh man, geez, I don't even
under
recall.
20.
It was probably around 20, something like that. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And what are we at now? Like 70 plus a bunch of ones that we've launched and since closed.
Yeah. Something I had over 60 or 65, I guess.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah.
So, one of the mythological stories about you that I hear at the water cooler in the cafeteria is that, not to put anything bad on Fran Rotoloso, who's a great portfolio manager and, is the boss, and he's a great guy. But from what I understand, Ed, you are the guy. We went back to the data thing, that you like data. You are the person who, late at night, 11 o'clock at night on a Wednesday night, you were here at work, messing around in the FactSet terminal, and you found this little index that there weren't any products around, the Fallen Angel Index. And I guess, is there any truth to that, and can you talk about Angel, from ideation to you finding some weird little index that nobody's talking about, to pitching it, trying to get it off the ground, trying to get people to buy into it, and then launching it, and then nobody cares. And then now I would say a pretty successful product, or a pretty successful ETF that's out there. Why don't you give us another tall tale about Angel?
It's funny how these stories found embellishments. Like, I don't know if it was at 11 o'clock at night.
No,
I don't know.
I just made that up.
Yeah, no, we came across, or I guess I came across this index, and look, it's only one of like 70 ETFs, and there's some monsters, but yeah, that one I'm kind of happy about, because there was this fixed income index in the high yield space. I guess for years now, a lot of the ETF space seems crowded already. Like, all the good indexes are gone. So I was like really happy to find this index. And then I think it just caught my attention because it was called Fallen Angel. I'm like, okay, what is that? And I had to learn about it. And when I learned about it and what it's doing, I was like, this is really such a great investment story. It is the epitome of what you want to do as an investor. You want to buy cheap, sell high. You want to take advantage. You want to be greedy when others are fearful, that kind of thing. So there was this embedded element in this index, or in this market, where institutional investors had to sell bonds that were downgraded by their investment policy. And that you, as an investor, or an investor that is not constrained by an investment grade only investment policy, could pick those up on the cheap. And the other thing that kind of stood out of that was, these were generally large companies at original issue at investment grade. So they had resources. They just made some bad decisions lately. And many of them came back, and that helped contribute to a great total return story for the index. So to me, it was just like it was a great story. And there were many cycles of that over time. It was a nice long live index. And, in our business now, we really can't show back tested indexes. It's got to be from when it was live. And then looking at that, I don't know if it went back to 97 or something. I forget now, but it was a nice long index. So brought that up to our management team. We used to meet in Jan's office with portfolio managers, our COO, Adam Phillips, our chief operating officer, our head of marketing at the time. And, we'd bandy about different ideas and sit around this little table, bring this up. And then luckily I was able to get one of the fixed income guys at the time, Mike Major, kind of on board. I believe I got him kind of behind me. I think Fran got behind it too. They agreed that there was a story there. And then there you go. 2012, I think, 2012, we launched it. And yeah, as you said, it sat there for 3 years. But there's a whole other story to that too, which I think is 2012 was a very busy year. We were launching a lot of product. Every shop has to kind of pick and choose which ones they're going to focus on. And that one had an interesting name, Fallen Angels, which, I had to educate myself what that was about. A lot of people had to learn about that. And I think it just took some time. But 3 years later, you look at the Morningstar ratings, whether or not you believe they should be applied to ETFs or not, but it had a 5-star rating. It had 5-star rating because it had killer performance. So that, we had a decision to make. It's like, all right, it's 3 years on, hasn't really raised a lot. I think it was under 20 million probably. And do we close this thing or do we give it some effort? And we decided to give it some effort, talk to the market, tighten the spreads, start to really push it from a sales and marketing standpoint. It took some time, probably took a year or so, but before we really saw the fruits of that labor, and then it really kind of took off from there.
And now there's a whole category. It's like a whole. There's it's not just our ETF, but there's other ETFs from other providers and around the world. It's a global category that's kind of there now that wasn't there 10 years ago. It's a cool story. I love that story. You're in the markets for a while and you get, there's all this big debate about efficient market hypothesis. Is there any kind of strategy that can outperform over the long term? And everybody knows the angel strategy. I mean, it's not like it's a secret, right? You're buying bonds that have been downgraded that were investment grade at the time, right? Like, do you think there's some kind of, and we have other strategies too. I would say Moat is a strategy that I think has outperformed since, its benchmark since we launched. I mean, what is it about these certain strategies that can outperform? And those are two different examples, I think, completely different strategies. But like, do you think you can find long-term outperformance in an index strategy or an active strategy? Or do you think you should just buy the S&P or some 60-40 portfolio and let it sit?
I think it's possible to have an index which can outperform a plain cap-weighted index. An index which can outperform active managers, and we've seen that even in fixed income. It varies. I think simple is better. The angel story is simple. You mentioned Moat already. That's one more disclosure we have to add. Thanks, JP. But yes, we can.
I'm going to list off as many tickers as I can.
But the underlying basis for those is a great investment story, or is the basic rule of thumb of investing. Buy great companies at a good price, or buy low, sell high. And so there's an underlying element to it which I think helps support it. There's a lot of really smart stuff out there which works in a certain environment, but then just totally falls apart in another. Again, I think you can get a little too fancy with all the different factor stuff. But it's fun looking at that and trying to understand what is influencing an ETF, or if there's a way to package that in a way that will consistently outperform.
With all that stuff in mind, how would you, if you could talk to 23-year-old Ed or 23-year-old JP and you could be like, hey, here's what I think you should do to advance your career or get that first job. I think there's two different questions maybe. So how would you say, you want to get that first job, what would you say? How would you coach somebody to get that first job?
One of the things that I found that we support a lot at VanEck is interns. I would definitely try to get an internship as much as you can. And I've been impressed with a lot of the young people that have come through that are doing that early on, like their junior year, even before their senior year. That's something that I did not do. And so I'm very fortunate and lucky to end up where I have. But I think those people that have some experience in the field that they eventually want to go into, but even just broader experience is beneficial. I think one that's probably the first thing that comes to mind. The other, and you were earlier had started to ask a question about people that contacted me on LinkedIn. I've had some college students contact me at times. It's hard to respond to all, so I apologize if I haven't responded. But occasionally I've taken a call or two, and just talk to them. Maybe I had times like, sure, and tell them about the life here or what it's like and different things they could consider. I think that's something that you could try to do. It may not always be successful. Accompany that with a nice note. Hey, in this case, a lot of them say, "Hey, saw your podcast, like your podcast." I immediately delete those because I don't believe them. But no, I'm joking. But write a nice little note, and you never know. Maybe you'll get a bite and get to talk to somebody.
I had a conversation. I was doing this other web series, and we had a whole episode. Me, Kyle, and this guy Patrick Bush from the digital asset team, and it was interesting because Patrick Bush got his job at Van Eck by emailing, his boss now, Siegel, directly, like resume and then like some writing samples and stuff like that. So I think that stuff can go a long way. The caveat is that I've also had people who email over and over, keep messaging, and it's just like, I mean, at some point, there's nothing I can do. Like, I'm not anyway.
Yeah. It's tough sometimes, but yeah,
it is tough. So once you get that job, though, Ed, what do you do then, right? Like, what are your philosophies? You talked about your management style philosophy. What's your kind of work ethic, or how to have a high impact? How do you do that? How does Ed do that?
I think anybody should make themselves indispensable, and that means doing not only what you're asked to do, but thinking ahead, doing more by thinking ahead of what your bosses might want, anticipating that. And by doing that, you show yourself to be a useful member of the team. Sometimes, it's hard to say that in this world where it's like, work-life balance and I'm out of here at 5:00 or whatever. And some people need to be, and that's fine. I get that. But sometimes you might have to give a little extra effort, whether it's working a little bit later to get something done in a quick manner, or whether it's doing some kind of training for yourself and paying for it out of pocket, just yourself. That's what you need to do. If you need to improve your presentation skills or writing skills or, whatever it is. Sometimes you just kind of need to take control of your own career and further that along so that you can move up to that next level.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one, except for the staying late part.
Yeah, I know. Well, at a certain point, and maybe you're getting there too, but I think earlier in your career, work your tail off as much as you can. As you get further up in your career, and maybe you have the ability to delegate to some people, then all right, take some time off. But don't cut yourself short. I mean, don't stay at work all night long just because you feel like that's I don't know. Just there has to be a reason or whatever. If you feel, you got to feel some passion behind it. So whenever I worked late, I felt passionate about what I was doing. Either it was like working on a spreadsheet or trying to build a new product or something. I was really into it. If you're not into it, then okay, you probably need to find something else.
Yeah, well, you don't want to be sitting there reading the New York Times at 6 p.m. at your desk. Like, that's not why you're supposed to be staying late, right? I remember one time I got up and left at like 5:05 or something. And this is back when I left the city, and you popped up and you're like, "Hey, I remember back when I was coming up. The junior people stayed later than the senior people. You couldn't leave your boss left." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm a millennial. Like, get over it."
Yeah, not complained about millennials ever since. I don't know.
Now we got Gen Z though. Now we got Gen Z, so we can all look down on them. No, Gen Z is great. So look, Ed, you've been doing a podcast 2020, right? January 2020.
Yeah, something like that.
Let's rewind to January 2020. I mean, it was a completely different world back then. What's the origin story of the podcast? Like, how is it?
It's interesting. We first tried a podcast when we were called Market Vectors on the ETF side. It was short-lived. We didn't really. I don't think the organization or the management organization really had an appreciation of that medium at that point. And I think podcasts had gone kind of through a cycle. There were a bunch of podcasts, and it kind of like, I feel like it went quiet for a while, and then suddenly people found podcasts again, and they became really popular. So I think the origin of this version of the podcast was really Jan Van Eck really getting into podcast. And it was funny because I knew this was coming because first he's really into podcasts, and he was saying, well, no, we wouldn't launch one because, we don't quite have the reach, and, we'll never do that. So he was just like really into them. But then, I don't know, what was it, like a year later, like, hey, let's launch a podcast. Like, okay, cool. But let's actually put some effort behind it, which is great. So we built a studio in our office, got a lot of great equipment. We had a production guy come in and help us, consultant. And yeah, I guess that's kind of where it really took off. And I wish I had could take credit for the name, but I believe that was Jan as well.
So you've got a whole team behind you, right? I mean, it's not just you talking into the mic. You've got a whole kind of production team. So shout out to the production team. I mean, like, what have you learned doing the podcast that maybe January 2020 you didn't have any idea of? Not on the content side, more on like putting something together and getting it out there and doing something.
Well, I have some technical learnings, but it was January 2020. We had built the studio. I think we did a couple in studio. We also did a couple externally on the road at a conference, and those came out really, nice and crisp. And then COVID happened, and we were no longer in office, and we had to adjust and start doing it from home. What else have I learned? I could talk a little bit about some of the technical stuff of doing it from home, or even just kind of setting up a podcast, because I feel like that experience where I had to learn how to light a room, how to, the different camera setups, how to connect a good camera to my computer, I wouldn't have learned if if COVID didn't happen.
I will say you have one of the best work from home views out of anybody, I think, honestly, that I ever talked to on Zoom. So, and that was pretty quick too. I don't think it was mediocre. I mean, you remember early COVID, I lived in I had like this dark room with a blue.
Yeah,
it was awful. It was terrible. So you stepped it up real quick, and you moved too.
Yeah,
during COVID.
Yeah, so you probably know this too. I'm a bit of a perfectionist. That's something I try to address or temper every day. And so if I was going to do this beyond video, I wanted it to look good. But some early learnings, like if anybody's trying to set up a podcast, I didn't have the beautiful wall of or bookshelves, like a lot of people have, and then that also just kind of became ubiquitous. Everybody had a bookshelf, so I always looked to do something different. But I had an apartment with a nice view, and so I tried to take advantage of that initially. But so you're trying to light a room against a wall of glass, and that's really hard because you get reflection. There's professional ways of doing it, but doing it on the cheap, I wasn't going to treat the windows of a rental apartment. I had some good shots sometimes, but then you have complications like cloud cover, changing your light exposure in the room, and so some of the ring lights that you could buy just didn't cut it. And so I eventually stepped up to like a spotlight with a modifier on it to really enhance the light in the room. I tried a green screen like you're working against right now at home. Found a great little device that you could pull up from behind the chair from the ground and hold up. But then that kind of limited how far away I could be from the camera to keep that green screen in screen. It also required really good lighting to light up that green as crisp as possible. So that way you looked as crisp as possible. And so when I moved, I was really happy to get rid of that thing because it was always a chore trying to get the light right. And anyway, I had a lot of different lights I could trip over. And so it was nice to be able to just have a real background. So anybody looking to do something, try to go for a real background if possible because it's just a little easier to deal with.
This is the 100th episode. So, I mean, you've done 99 episodes. Can you maybe zip through a couple of your favorite episodes or guests?
Well, maybe I can. Yeah, I got a few call outs. One, probably the first guest, which I really have to thank for getting us going, was Ben Carlson, who is at the Ritholtz Group. He had a book, A Wealth of Common Sense, which I really liked, kind of coming from the Ibbotson world of trying to help people and understand why they need to invest for the long term and not get caught up by fads and things like that. But the Ritholtz team was really great in allowing us to go to their office because they, as you probably know, they have a lot of great content, video content, podcast content. So we went to their office to film. It was kind of funny. Laura Jones and I walked over there one humid day after I had a really long workout or long run on the west side. And oh my God, I was trying to cool myself off. I couldn't cool myself off. So if you go back and look at that video, you'll see a very shiny face and kind of sweating. It's like, oh God, this is great. This is not the entrance I wanted to have or the debut I wanted to have for the podcast, but it was good. And he was pleasant, and I think we had fun. So that was cool. So shout out to Ben Carlson for that one. I had the opportunity too to meet some inspirational guests like Tyrone Ross. We did a podcast at the ETF conference early 2020, I guess February 2020. And man, he's just a force of nature, right? And he kind of gets you pumped up, wanting to do the right thing. And so I love that one. He's also got a very athletic background and challenges in his life. So there's a great personal story there too. So that was really fun to do with him. And then I've had the opportunity to speak to a number of kind of these new age financial advisors, or I'll call, I guess, millennial financial advisors that are really trying to cut a different rug, do things a little different, whether it's subscription pricing for their financial planning practice rather than just assets under management. But Justin Castelli is one that stands out as another also inspirational one. But just really helping people, as he says, live their authentic self or their authentic life. And I just love talking to people like that. And so those have been fun. And then we've done a few that are not necessarily investment related. We've had those opportunities to do that too, kind of, lifestyle or whatever it is. And one of the ones that stands out to me there is Darlene Marshall. And it was all about wellness. And what I liked about it was changing your mindset, your approach to life. This was kind of in the later stages, I guess, of COVID, when we were going back to work or not going back to work, and COVID was surging or not surging, and I think at that point, people were tired of being at home, whether or not they had to continue wearing a mask. And so that was kind of the basis of it, of like, how do you just get yourself, reduce the anxiety a little bit of what's going on. But I found in that one also things that we know as common sense, but it's helpful to hear again, like when you're faced with things that aren't going your way necessarily, how to, change your mindset to find a better balance. I'll tell you one guy that was really nice too, and I mentioned this one because he busted me actually during the interview. Chris Versace, we were talking about thematic strategies. Yeah, and he's a great guy, and I like talking to him, and we've stayed in contact. But I remember he was telling me about some theme. I guess it was it might have been cybersecurity or some digital theme, and as you know, JP, you're going through it right now as the host, you're partly listening to me, and you're also partly thinking about what's your next question.
Yeah.
And so he mentioned something that should have prompted me to ask more questions, but I was already thinking about the next question. And he goes, "What? You don't want to know?" Or like, and it's like, what? Well, like, what did I miss? It's like, yeah, all right. So it's tough to be a host, you're trying to manage within a time frame. You're thinking about the next question. But I thought that was funny, and it was just a reminder. It is kind of a tough job, but you got to listen. And
it is tough, and it's like we're having a conversation, and you trying to listen to if you're the guy who's like in charge or hosting or whatever, you have your list of questions, which I have right here, and then you're saying things which might not be on the list at all. And then I'm like, oh, well, that's cool, but I don't want to interrupt, And so then you've got, okay, I got to follow this, what I know. And then he's asking saying I want to follow up to that. But then, like, finally, when you might be done talking in 30 seconds, you forget what you were talking about or what you wanted to ask. And then you're just like, you just go back to the notes. You're like, all right, next question.
Yeah. I mean, the great thing about the way we do it is Sam can cut stuff out, so you can take your time to like, what the hell was I thinking, I've had that happen a few times. Like I lost my train of thought and I had to stop and just kind of think about it again. But yeah.
So what have you learned? Final meta podcast question. What are some of the lessons that you've learned? You kind of touched on them a little bit when you just went through your favorite episodes, but Jerry Springer, like final thoughts. What you've learned from doing this for the last 3 years?
That there's a lot of really interesting people. I think the prep calls are very useful. Maybe if we had more time and deeper budget to do it or whatever, I might actually record the prep sessions. Because sometimes I've had great discussions during the prep sessions and I'm like, damn, I wish I recorded that, and could piece together two different, recording pieces together and make a nice, really interesting podcast. But the prep sessions I think are helpful. I think our guests appreciate that when they can join, and I give them a heads up in terms of what's coming, with the understanding that we can go wherever.
What's your favorite? Do you listen? Are you a podcast guy? You listen to podcasts a lot. What are some of your favorite podcasts?
I'm not a huge podcast guy, honestly. Funny enough, I do listen occasionally, just kind of sporadically, if something that looks interesting. I do listen to All In sometimes with Chamath at times and his buddies. not all the time. I know Jan's a big fan of the Compound. I think that's good too. I mean, I catch that here and there. But there's some great ones out there. Some different ones. There used to be this real estate one that I really liked. And it's been a while since I've followed it. I think it was like the Best Damn Real Estate Show or something like that. They would do a daily podcast, which I thought it's insane. I don't know how you do a daily podcast, but I liked that approach, which was their approach was basically as a real estate investor or somebody kind of interested in that, like learning how different investors have done different things, whether it's single family homes, multi-family properties, commercial storage, whatever, syndications. They had all these different themes, and they'd bring people on that were willing to talk about it. And I loved the accessibility it seemed to those people, and how did you do it, and what did you learn, and then at the end, how do people stay in touch with you and find out more? Anyway, I liked the basic format of how they did it, how they kind of broke it down. So anyway, that was another. Other than that, I listen to a lot of music.
What's your favorite band? Which Gen X band?
Oh my God, that's a tough question. The first thing that comes to my mind is the Cult, the Strokes.
You like the Strokes, huh? I've seen them like 6 times. I love the Strokes.
Have you? Oh, they're awesome. I like that. I started getting into some indie more recently, so I like a lot of that music. Let's see if I can change it up a little bit. Willie Nelson.
Willie Nelson, he's good. I saw him with Bob Dylan in Richmond. It's like
is that right?
Or something like that. Yeah.
Oh, that's all. I've never seen him. I'm from Texas. I'm from the Austin area. I've never seen him. So that sucks. I know he just turned 90, which is amazing.
He's still playing.
Yeah, still going.
I saw Willie and Merle Haggard in Dallas one time too.
And Merle Haggard too? Oh man.
Yeah.
You didn't catch it when I joined the podcast. I was playing.
I heard you playing.
Oh no, playing Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
All right. I think we're about to the part of the show that everybody likes the most is when you get to opine on whether something is a trend or a fad. And from what I understand, you usually just do like kind of one or two that are focused on the the specific expertise of the guest. But because you're a man of many talents, I've got a long list of them. And I was thinking rapid fire, or if you have something to say about one of them, go for it. But I'm going to rapid fire trend or fad, and if you have thoughts, let them rip. Ready?
No wrong. Okay, yeah, no wrong answer.
All right, trend or fad? Work from home.
Fad.
Yeah, I think so too. Do you agree with that? I mean, do you agree?
No, I think we should be able to have way more flexibility. We being everybody, more flexibility in our work and personal lives. And if I get the idea of culture and whatever, but maybe there's a way around that, a way to help still foster that. I think a hybrid is probably the best balance of that right now.
Trend or fad, Ed? NFTs.
Oh my God. Fad right now, but perhaps long-term trend.
There's been a lot of remakes, like 90s nostalgia, stuff like that. Do you think that's a trend or fad? You think that how long you give that till it goes away, or do you think it's here to stay?
I think some form of it is a trend. I don't know if it would be all. Well, I'll go remakes. You asked about 90s remakes, but there's probably some trend to that. Yeah.
My feeling is every 10 years, it's like there's like a 30-year look. There's a certain amount of look back. So every 10 years, just the look back period goes up a little bit, Yeah. I feel like 80s was 2010s. I think everybody was kind of like thinking about the 80s and focused on the 80s.
Yeah.
In the 2000s, from 2000 to 2010, I think it was 70s. Like when you think about a band like The Strokes that comes out in 2001.
Yeah.
It was very 70s. So I think it just goes up every 10 years. You just move up. So pretty soon there's going to be 2000s, right? The late 2020s, we'll be looking back at the 2000s. That's my answer, though. All right, trend or fad, Ed? Direct indexing.
Trend.
Trend or fad, Ed? ESG.
I think the way it's been used is faddish. I think there is something behind. I think hopefully ESG itself, the name, I don't know, it goes away. Or I mean, it's been so many different things. I think there is a trend of people wanting to invest with their values, helping influence companies in a way that's better for society. So I think that's a trend. The way it's been applied or marketed, I don't know. I feel like it's been very faddish.
All right, final Trend or fad, Ed, and this is the most important one. Pickleball. Trend or fad?
Fad.
What? It's like the fastest growing. If pickleball, if we could ETF a pickleball, we'd have that thing filed already. The pickleball industry. I mean, that thing is It's like the fastest growing, sport in the country by a million. So
yeah, you're right. I've asked that question too. I think it could. Yeah, we'll see. I don't feel super strong about that. But what did I have to say about that? Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Have you played it?
I never played, but Dylan on our team play. Brandon plays. He's got like a Dads of New Jersey group that he hangs out with and plays pickleball with.
Oh, you know what? I mean, I could very well be wrong, but we'll see in a few years, I guess. But yeah, somebody told me that, and maybe it is a trend because it's a smaller court, right? Than tennis, it's a little less demanding on the body.
Yeah.
And so it's something you could play as you get older. So
I got one more for you, Ed.
Yeah, cool.
Trend or fad, Bitcoin. How much do you like your job, Ed?
Yeah. Can I take the fifth?
I really appreciate you a lot, Ed. Congratulations on 100 episodes. I know that's a big deal, and it's 100 different guests. It's 100 different prep calls. It's 100 different recording sessions. That's a lot, and it's nothing to be. It's something to be proud of. And thank you for everything, and all the best.
Thank you, JP, and thanks for being the host on this one. And as we move into the next century of podcasts, if people have got ideas for people that we want to bring on the podcast, shoot us a message. Let us know, and let's keep this going.
And thanks a lot for joining us. This is JP signing off from Trends with Benefits.